Now we are going to talk about static keyword, right? This is again an important keyword in Java programming language. When do we use static keyword, right? And where do we use static keyword? Why do we use static keyword? Do we use static keyword with class? Do we use static keyword with method, with inner class? Why main method is static in nature? When do we use static keyword? Right? What is the relevance to use static keyword? How should I decide which variable or method should be static in nature? We'll try and answer all these questions. Alright, so let's first start with the basic, definition, or let's start with the two rules as far as static keyword is concerned. I'll give you a definition little later. So let's talk about rule number one. See, rule number one as far as static keyword is concerned is, see, static keyword basically, you know, let's talk about a rule number one. So first rule is each and every object of my class, of a class that I create, each and every object has got a unique or a distinct copy, of all non-static data members. Each and every object of my class has got a unique copy of all non-static data members. So for example, if I am working in a retail based project, and if I have 1000 projects or 1000 products or more to cater to in my retail based application, the product ID, the product pricing, the product description, the product, loyalty promo code, or product, other detailing about product must be different from each other. They might not be common, they might not be same as other products, right? So these are all non-static. Just go by English name. These are non-static. All right. I'll talk about inner classes in module 7. Just don't worry, right? So here I was saying that product ID is non-static. Static is what? That remains consistent. Right? In general English also means static is what? That remains consistent. Non-static is what? That does not remain consistent. That remains non-static, right? Static is that remains consistent, that does not change over the period of time, that changes very oftenly, right? That changes after, when there is a global level change or something like that. For example, the retail name, company name, right? The company addresses, the company stores, the company zip codes, all right, these are static global level variables. So let's say, to understand this concept, each and every object of a class has got a unique or a distinct copy of all non-static data members. What I can do, I can create another folder or a package here inside class 3, right? And under this very folder or a package, I can create a class called, let's say, counter, right? So I am creating one count variable with value, let's say 10. Right, here is my constructor, method which is having same name as that of a class, having no return type. I'm just incrementing the value of count variable, and thereafter I'm printing the value of count variable. So I'm saying the value of count variable is, and here I printed it, right? So the constructor is ready. Thereafter in my main method, if I create 3 objects of counter class, you will think that constructor will get invoked 3 times, right? So when constructor will get invoked 3 times, the count variable will be incremented 3 times. So if I give you 2 options, that whether you are going to get this output or whether you are going to get this output, which one do you think? What will be the output of count variable? See, the point is, these are objects of my class, and I said the rule is each and every object of my class is having the unique copy or a distinct copy of all non-static data members. This is a non-static data member because there is no static keyword written over here. So when they are having unique or distinct copy of all non-static data members, that means each and every object will get a value as 10 only. right? So the value in each three object creation will be 11, 11, 11, because each and every object of my class is having a unique or a distinct copy of these non-static data members, right? If I run this piece of code, this is what my output is. And the moment I say that this very field is static, now the rule changes. The second and the last rule to understand the definition of a static keyword is, concerned. The last rule is each and every object of my class, you know, shares or has, shares a same copy of all static data members, static variables. They all have same copy of static data members. Because it is static, it remains the same. It is a global level variable now, right? Like a retail company name, like the retail company address, like the retail company zip code, how many stores they have. These are all global level variables. Now when I run this piece of code, each and every object will share a same copy. So first one will increment to 11, the second one will get 11 and make it to 12, the third one will get 12 and make it to 13, and print 11, 12 and 13. Right. So if I save this and if I run this program, this is what the output is. So each and every object shares same copy of static data members, and each and every object has unique or distinct copy of all non-static data members, from where I can derive my basic definition that static keyword basically, static keyword is used or is put in front of those variables that belongs to a class, that belongs at a global level, right, to the class, to my entire functionality, right, which is not going to be different for different objects of my class, right? This is the foundation before I actually tells this definition, right? Now let's see when can we use static keyword. So I'm creating another class. Let's say this time, let's say organization, right? And considering, I will have different employees in my organization who has employee ID, who had got different names, who have got different designations, who have got different age. This must be different. But one thing is for sure that I know that organization of all employees, let's say ABC Consultancy Limited, this is not going to be different. So I made a right call from a memory management point of view also, that when the data is not going to be changed for all employees, and let's say I've got 1000 employees in my organization, so 1000 employees will have these three different values. So as a programmer, I made a call that when the data is not going to change, let's make it non-static, and when the data is going to be consistent, let's make it static. Because from memory management point of view also, I'm going to allocate just one bucket, just one index, just one memory allocation to this very variable, and I will allocate 1000 indexes, 1000 buckets to this very variable, this variable, this variable. So I don't want heap space issues to occur when my application runs. I don't want unnecessary log files to pop up to load when my application runs. So I made this call. Thereafter, I created a constructor. I said, you give me these three attributes, employee ID, you give me the name, and you give me the age. You give me these three attributes and I will create the object for you. Right, you give me the name, I will create the object for you. You give me the age, I will create the object for you. Right, so this way I will create the object. Right, so my constructor is also ready. Yeah, no, you're right, Abhishek. So when the data is going to change, we should make it not static. Right, so constructor is also ready. Now if I go to my main method and if I create, let's say, three employee class, organization based object, let's say obj1. This is my constructor. I set the employee id is, let's say, 123, name is, let's say, a, and age is, let's say, 25. Right, so I created three objects like this. I could have created many more, but I just created three objects. Right, in the first case this is the employee id, in the second case this, and then let's say this. Let's say these are the names. Let's say this is the age. Right, now I'm going to have a method called display. Right, as part of this very method I printed the id of an employee. Right, after I printed the name of an employee. Thereafter I printed the age of an employee, and thereafter I printed the organization name of an employee. Now I know that the ID, name and age is going to be different for different employees, but organization name is going to remain consistent. So if I call display method with all three objects, all three objects will call different ID, name and age, but organization name will be same. Right, so if I run this piece of code, I will get the employee ID as different for all three employees. Name will be different, age will be different, and organization name will also will be same, ABC. Right, here is the output. All right, name, age and salary. Name, ID, name and age is different, organization name is the same. Right, then the rule number 3 comes, which is if I need to make a change in the static variable, then what should I do? There might be a scenario where there is a requirement to make a global level change for a static variable. In that case, what should I do? Right, so for that, especially static methods are being given to us, which only entertain static variables. There cannot be a non-static variable as part of a static method. Right, here in my scenario, the company name does not change very commonly, but if it changes, I'm just making a company name change method, which is static method. Right, first if I show you, can I use any non-static variable here? No, I'll get a compilation error. That this can't be done. A non-static variable can't be accessed in a static way. Cannot make a static reference to the non-static field. So logically this is all wrong. Logically I created a static method just to do this, just to make a global level change for a static variables. Now to do this, in the very first place here, I could have called this method. Since it is static, it does not require any object. Right, I could have done this also, and the company name will change from ABC to XYZ for all three employees, because all three fields are non-static, which I am sending as part of object creation, but organization name will now change to XYZ if I run this piece of code. Right, and since this is a static method, when there is no object required to call this method, I could have used a class name to call this method also. I could have also done the same. This is also same. Right, now one last rule to understand static keyword, which is, I got your point that static method is used to just change the static variable at a global level. What about non-static methods? See, at least I should give the access to both static as well as non-static variables to the object. Right, and I know my display method in this very scenario is non-static method, where I am already using static variable. Right, here I am using non-static variables and I am using static variable also, and this is a non-static method. And just that objects can use the global level variables right? So that they can actually access them, I made, my non-static method has access to both non-static field as well as static field. I could have done this over here also, right? That is not mandatory that it has to be done in main method only, because display is getting called on top of, by each and every object. So if I would have run this piece of code, it would have given me a similar output, right? So these are the four rules I need to keep in mind when I think about static keyword, when I use static keyword. Each and every object of my class has got a unique or a distinct copy of all non-static data members. Each and every object of my class shares the same copy of all static data members. For static variables, I've got static methods. First, one non-static method has got access of all static as well as non-static variables, so at least they can use those variables. This is about static keyword. All right. Thereafter, there are multiple APIs in Java programming language that has got all static methods. If I have understood those rules properly, for example, if I talk about a math utility in Java lang package, all min max method, they are all static in nature because their functionality is kind of final. Their functionality does not change very often, right? Local date, local time, Gregorian calendar, they all provide static method because their functionalities kind of remain consistent. All right, so if I just take an example of static keyword, right here, let's talk about certain methods of certain APIs which are all static in nature. So I'm creating one class, let's say use static methods, right, of many existing APIs. So let's say if I want to use min method of math class, all I need to do is use the min math class and pass, let's say, these two variables. It will give me a minimum out of these two variables, right? My point is to tell you that whenever you see a method name used directly with the class, basically there, you know basically there that ways you can just assume that these very methods are all static in nature. These very methods, since they are accessed directly with the class, they are all static in nature, right? So I've got a minimum out of 2, I've got a maximum out of 2, right? These are all static method of math class. I will talk, in later package, in later modules, module 32 and module I believe 30 and 29, I've talked about local date time APIs. There are a number of methods I've used directly with the class name, right? So this is about you know existing static methods of existing APIs. Then why my main method is static? See, my JVM needs to invoke the main method, right? My JVM has to run the main method, and my JVM will never create an object to call the main method, right? So when the object will not be required to get created first before main method is executed, right? If main is non-static, then my JVM has to first create a method object of my class to call the main method. So very simple reasoning is available in books and on internet, that since my JVM has to run the main method directly, that is the reason the main method is created as static. Otherwise, my JVM has to first create the object of a class to call the main method, right? So that is why main method is static in nature, so that no initial object creation is required to be created. All right. Thereafter, there is something called a static initializer block, right? So if I have got a static method for static variables, I have something called as static initializer block, which works like a constructor for static variable. So here, if I have a non-static field, this is a non-static variable, and all non-static variables are initialized as part of constructors. I would have created this constructor to initialize this field, let's say with value 10, right? And here I've got a static, here this is my non-static field. This is a non-static variable, right? Here I'm creating a static field also, let's say called static variable. So for static fields, we create static initializer block, right? We initialize static variables as part of static initializer block with value, let's say 20. So I've got both non-static variables. I've got static variable. Non-static variable I've created or initialized as part of constructor. Static variables are initialized as part of this static initializer block, right? If I have a main method, you know this static initializer block is the first block that gets executed. So if I just write the SOP, here I am simply writing static initializer block, right? Here I am writing down that this is a main method, right? So I've got a main method, and here I am writing down, just for my understanding, that this is a constructor, right? Now if I create an object of my class, and while creating the object the constructor will get invoked, right? So just to let you know, first my static initializer block will get executed to initialize all static variables. This will be the first block. Thereafter main method will be executed, thereafter constructor will executed as part of object creation, right? Using this object I could have accessed the non-static variable to print this data. And since I've got a static variable also which does not require any object, so I can simply call static variable like this. It will print me this value of static variable also, which is 20, right? So I've got static variable, non-static variable. I've got a constructor to initialize non-static variable. I've got a static initializer block to initialize static variable, right? If I run this very piece of code, you will see, because main will not get printed first, because static initializer block is the first block that gets executed when I run my application. Static initializer block, main method, constructor, value of non-static variable, value of static variable, right? And this was what I was talking about, right? This is what I was talking about. And if you remember, in the module 2 for loop performance test, I initialized my array list to check all for loop scenario using static initializer block. Now this is, and there is something called as non-static initializer block also, like this. This is equivalent to constructor. Whether you use non-static initializer block or whether you use constructor, they are one and the same thing. I could have done this thing over here also. Here, as part of non-static initializer block, I'm just writing non-static initializer block. So if I run this piece of code, what will happen if I just don't initialize this, because I am already initializing as part of constructor. Now what will happen? First static initializer block will get executed, then main method will get executed, then while object creation, first non-static initializer block will get executed, and then constructor will get executed. And if I would have created another object, now what will happen? So now, first static initializer block, then main method, then non-static constructor. Since I am recreating another object, again non-static and constructor, and then the values will come. If I run this piece of code, this is the output: static, main, non-static constructor, 10, 20. If I would not have written constructor, which I would have avoided it, if I am going ahead with non-static initializer block, I could have done this, right? Then this scenario happens, right? This is the output, Right, this is what a static or a non-static initializer block is. Alright, so we talked about four keywords of static, four rules of static keyword, and then we talked about what static initializer block for initializing static variable. We talked about non-static initializer block for initializing non-static variable, which is equivalent to constructor. Right, now in real-time applications, where do we use static initializer block? Right, so basically, once you learn collections and hash map, let's say I've got a hash map variable of key value pair string, right? And you want to populate this field upfront. Before you actually start using this field, you want to populate this field. So you thought, I will populate this field in the static initializer block, because my object will be populated upfront. So you use hash map object, you use put method, you use this is the key and this is the value, or you would have queried the database to get the data. Your object is all ready before you actually want to use it. Right, similarly there could be, the very popular scenario is, why don't load the driver also when you, if you, before you want to query the database, you have got com dot oracle dot jdbc dot oracle driver. Let us load the driver upfront. Why wait to for a query execution? Right, this will load the driver also. Similarly, if you have got a properties files to load, I could have loaded the entire properties file also. Right. And thereafter, I can start using the properties file however I want to use. Right, I could have loaded the properties file before I actually want to use it. So basically all initial level work for all static variable can be done as part of static initializer block. Right, this is about static keyword, and if I've understood this, I've understood the major part of Java project, trust me. Static keyword is somewhere, every programmer gets stuck, and if this keyword is not used properly with variables or with methods, our functionality is going to get, stop working one day, when the whole thing will collectively work. Majorly those whole thing does not work when this very keyword, static keyword, is not used properly in the entire project. All right, this is what static keyword is, and this is how static keyword is being used. All right, thank you.